drum beats that you're hearing are the sounds of the Maroons, which speaks volume of the story that I'm about to tell you. There's a place in Jamaica where history never went to sleep. A place where the past isn't something you read about, it's something you walk on. Something you feel in the soil, in the drums, in the names etched into the land. And when Hurricane Melissa struck St. Elizabeth, it awakened that history again. Because while most Jamaicans saw the hurricane pass, Accompong saw something of their horrible, historic, turbulent, something that from the eyes of most people on the outside looking in would seem most imminent. Families lost crops, roads were damaged, homes were damaged, and the government came, ready with relief, ready with soldiers, ready with authority. They entered Accompong, had their meeting, offered their support, and afterwards, Chief Richard Curry stepped forward with a message that shook the entire island. Relief? Yes, but the military cannot occupy Maroon land. To some, it sounded outrageous. To others, it sounded brave. But to Accompong, it sounded like history repeating itself. And to understand that, you have to go back to Jamaica. Jamaica before the 1600s. What do I mean by that, some would say? Long before British carved plantations into the island, long before Jamaica had parishes and councils, there were Africans who refused to bow. When enslaved Africans escaped the plantations of the 1600s and the early 1700s, they didn't just run, they fought. They fled into the cockpit country, a natural fortress of limestone hills, caves, sinkholes, and ridges so dangerous that the British soldiers feared chasing them inside. These warriors formed communities with names that still echoes today. Nannytown, Trelawney Town, Cudjo's Town, and Accompong. They survived by skill, strategy, and an unshakable belief in freedom. Not handed to them, but taken by force. Accompong, the man, was not a fictional hero. I'm sure many of you didn't even know that Accompong was the name of an actual person. Yes, this town was named after Accompong, a significant Maroon leader and the brother of the famous Maroon general Cudjo, a diplomat, a warrior who understood the cockpit country like a second skin. Accompong helped to lead the battles that shaped the First Maroon War. He fought side by side with Cudjo, his brother, and the other captains until the British realized something unthinkable. They could not win. Now fast forward to 1738. Exhausted and humiliated, the British signed the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. This wasn't a treaty offered to a defeated people. No. It was a treaty offered to people that could not be defeated. It granted land, 500 acres initially and expanding over time, it also granted self-governance under their own kernel and councils, and freedom, not symbolic freedom, but recognized autonomy. And one critical line: no British troops were allowed to enter Maroon territory without permission from Maroon leaders. Now take note of that. That clause is the heartbeat of the current conflict. This treaty did not dissolve in emancipation. It did not dissolve in 1962. It survived because the Maroons never surrendered it. Make of that what you want. Now, moving right along. The British didn't stop testing the Maroons. In 1795, another war broke out, this time with the Trelawney Town Maroons. The British brought overwhelming forces. The fighting was brutal, and the terrain bled with both sides' losses. When negotiations came, the British made promises they later broke. The result? Hundreds of Maroons were tricked into surrendering, captured, and banished. First to freezing Nova Scotia, then to Sierra Leone. Families were broken, communities erased, a people uprooted from the land their ancestors fought for. To the Maroons of Accompong, that betrayal is not ancient history. It is inherited memory, the memory of what happens when a foreign army enters Maroon territory. This is why military presence is not just help. It is a symbol, a reminder, a line they are terrified to cross again. After emancipation, the Maroons continued governing themselves. They weren't absorbed into the plantation system. They weren't inherited into colonial structures. They lived by their own rules in their own strongholds. Their independence made colonial governors uncomfortable. Their autonomy made planters anxious. Attempts were made, quietly and often subtly, to diminish Maroons' rights, weaken their land claims, and bring them under the colonial legal system. None of this fully succeeded. When Jamaica entered the 20th century, Accompong was still standing, still governed by colonels, still observing the treaty, and still guarding the cockpit country. By the 1950s, the colonial government began scouting cockpit country for mining potential. The Maroons resisted fiercely. Government survey teams were turned away. Maps were rejected. And boundaries were defended. Political leaders tried to argue the treaty was obsolete. Maroons argued, "We signed a treaty. We never surrendered it." Independence cannot erase what was signed in blood. These clashes shaped modern Maroon identity. The belief that sovereignty is not a metaphor, but a contractual right. When Jamaica became independent in 1962, the new constitution never specifically addressed the Maroon treaties. Successive governments treated Maroons as citizens of Jamaica. The Maroons treated themselves as citizens of Accompong and Jamaica, but with special status. This unresolved tension simmered quietly for decades until a man named Richard Curry stepped onto the scene. Richard Curry became Colonel of Accompong in 2021, and immediately everything changed.
Greetings. I'm Chief Richard Curry, duly elected leader of the indigenous Maroon people of the Cockpit country. I'm a humble countryman, raised in rural Jamaica, among a unique set of tribal people residing in the hills of the Cockpit country. My people bravely defended Jamaica against colonization and defended the right of Aboriginal people in Jamaica to govern ourselves and our own land, in Jamaica land we love.
He is young, articulate, charismatic, social media savvy, and fiercely committed to Maroon sovereignty. He speaks openly about land rights, the Cockpit country protection, mining resistance, and the validity of the 1738 treaty. Under his leadership, Accompong has revived traditional governance, asserted stronger territorial claims, challenged government statements, built relationships with global indigenous communities, and reignited national debates about sovereignty in Jamaica. He is admired by many, criticized by some, but undeniably influential. Whether you agree with him or not, Richard Curry has brought the Maroon question back into the mainstream Jamaican consciousness. And Hurricane Melissa placed that question directly in the spotlight. When the hurricane hit St. Elizabeth, Accompong suffered real damages. Fields were destroyed, roads became impassable, and families needed help. The government came, ODPM came with supplies, the JDF with manpower, and officials ready to assess the damage. They entered Accompong, they met with council, and they returned to their trucks. And afterwards, Chief Curry came forward and drew a line. Relief is welcome, but the military presence is not. He emphasized that the disaster recovery must remain civilian-led, that military involvement inside Maroon territory breaches ancestral laws, and that the treaty forbids foreign armies, even Jamaican ones, from occupying their land.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Andrew Holness, on behalf of the indigenous people of Accompong and the wider Maroon districts of Cockpit country, I send sincere appreciation for your recent visit to our community and for the government of Jamaica's expression of support following the destruction caused by Hurricane Melissa. Your presence, accompanied by the several ministers of government, marked the first official visit of your administration to Accompong since my election in 2021, and it was warmly welcomed by our people. We remain grateful for the humanitarian gesture extended to the Accompong people and for your willingness to mobilize resources, particularly those of the JDF military, to assist with the recovery efforts. We also acknowledge your reference on international partners including Ethiopia, Ghana, and Rwanda, who have expressed readiness to assist in the island's rebuilding efforts. Honorable Prime Minister, following a deep, comprehensive internal review and a formal deliberation, the full Maroon Council has this time decided not to accept the offer on the militarization of the space during the recovery effort. The full Maroon Council instead has resolved to continue with the response, utilizing civilian resources from our joining communities and our partners, both locally and internationally, who have offered to the community their assistance in the recovery efforts.
To the Jamaican government, it felt unreasonable. To Accompong, it felt protective. To the outside world, it felt confusing. But to history, it felt familiar. This conflict is not just political, it is philosophical, moral, emotional. When a community needs help, does the government have the right or the obligation to act in spite of their objections? And when a people have defended their land for centuries, do they have the right to decide who enters it, even during a disaster? The government argues responsibility. The Maroons argue autonomy. And in between these two positions are the ordinary people of Accompong, farmers, shopkeepers, elders, children who might not care what section of which document says what. They just want their roof secure, their roads passable, their meals certain. That tension finally burst into the open in the form of protest. In the days after Chief Curry's announcement, residents in Accompong and surrounding areas held demonstrations. Some came out strongly against his decisions, holding placards, calling for the government and the JDF to be allowed in fully to speed up rebuilding and road work. Others defended the Colonel and the Council's stance, insisting that the treaty and the community's autonomy had to be respected even in crisis. Jamaican media reports and talk shows describe the tone as split over the refusal of JDF support, and Chief Curry later appeared responding to calls for unity and explaining his position again.
Not want to see the face of politics, right? What we have been doing has been nothing but transparent in getting the need that is required to the communities that require it, right? What we've been now doing is assiduously planning the recovery efforts for Accompong. The January 6th celebrations is around the corner. There's also a lot of planning and work that has to go in that. People underestimate the level of time and work that it takes to put these things together. There are a few who thought the response was saying we do not want any help, and that was not the message. That was not what was communicated. So again, look forward in an affirmative way that the council and the government will be working together to aid in the recovery process of Accompong and adjoining Maroon district.
What happened in Accompong after Hurricane Melissa wasn't just a disagreement about trucks and sodas. It was a reawakening of a conversation that Jamaica has pushed aside for too long. A conversation about land, about legacy, and whether we're truly one nation or a nation with a memory too powerful to erase. This wasn't a protest against relief. It was a plea to be remembered, not as victims, but as people with a promise still unkept. Because at the center of all of this are real people. There's no villain in this story. There's only pain and pride and history so deeply rooted that even a hurricane can't wash it away. Now, tell me in the comments, what do you think Jamaica should do? Educate a friend today. Share this video with someone who thinks that this is about clearing roads. Because until we understand the history, we will never understand the story. Walk good, Jamaica, and stay safe.